I will say just a little bit about tenant satisfaction measures specifically, because as I said, the consumer regulation, the consumer standards review, um, that needs to wait for the government to legislate before we can carry out that work formally. However, the tenant satisfaction measures that the white paper sets out, they require quite a long lead-in time to implement, and we don't need legislation before a change in legislation before we can do so. So we're going to start the work on the tenant satisfaction measures in advance of other things. We're very keen to emphasize the point that the tenant satisfaction measures are important, but actually probably the most fundamental thing to the whole new consumer regulation regime will be those new consumer standards. But what you're going to see from us in terms of formal consultation first is going to be the tenant satisfaction measures, which are an important tool in the new regime, but not absolutely fundamental in the same way that the standards will be. But the social housing white paper sets out two aims for those tenant satisfaction measures: to provide tenants with greater transparency about landlord performance, and also to be an important input into our regulatory oversight of compliance with the consumer standards. So we've been asked to bring in a set of tenant satisfaction measures for landlords on things that matter to tenants. And in terms of things that matter to tenants, the white paper sets out some themes. These are indeed the same themes that were in the social housing green paper, which were informed by the ministerial roundtables that took place after the Grenfell Tower fire. So I'll quickly move on to what the white paper actually says about the themes and the measures themselves. So here are the draft measures that are in the social housing white paper. Obviously, there's 24 of them, I think. I'm not going to talk through all of these. They're set out in the white paper document itself, but they're all listed out here. I guess the point is that there are measures here that relate to all of the themes that were set out in the green paper. And they include a mix of quantitative objective measures of performance, as well as more qualitative perception-based measures that are about tenant satisfaction. So there's a mixture of kind of performance and satisfaction measures within the overall suite. Now, these are the ones that the government has proposed, but very much so as draft measures. So it's now incumbent on us to kind of go out and consult stakeholders on these measures, which is what we will be doing in due course, as I will set out in the timetable shortly. We've developed a set of principles that we want to underpin our approach to implementing the tenant satisfaction measures. So firstly, and we're going to test each of the measures that have been proposed against these principles. So the first one is that the measure needs to be relevant and it needs to speak to both aims for the TSMs that were set out in the white paper. We also want them to ensure that they're accurate, and there's a range of different points here about accuracy, about ensuring that there can be a kind of clear and consistent definition, things like that. Also about making sure that we're not introducing measures that have significant scope for gaming, or at least in the sort of underlying definitions that we provide, we try to minimize that as far as possible. That they're subject to kind of a really sound survey methodology, those kinds of things. So accuracy obviously is really important. We also want the measures to be responsive, and by that we mean we want the measures to be kind of clearly attributable to the thing that they're allegedly described to kind of measure. And we also want them to be able to provide timely reporting of performance. And we also want to avoid introducing any measures that create potential perverse incentives as well. And then there's also a kind of question around deliverability. Obviously, collecting all of this information is going to incur costs. So we want to make sure that we're not introducing measures that will in some way be particularly costly to record. So those are some of the principles that will underpin our approach to the kind of further development of the tenant satisfaction measures. Here's a bit about the timeline. As I said, it does require quite a long lead-in time before you can introduce something like this. We're not anticipating being in a position for providers to begin collecting data until April 2023. So we're going through a process of stakeholder engagement now, leading up to a statutory consultation probably over the winter into next spring. Then we need to kind of, well, obviously we need to analyze the feedback from that consultation process, then confirm the outcome of the consultation and publish the final set of tenant satisfaction measures and the technical guidance that will underpin them. And then we need to do that in the summer so that there's enough lead-in time then for providers to prepare information systems that they will need to be able to gather that information so that we can have data collection beginning in April 23, as I said. So that's the timetable that we're working to at the moment. We're doing stakeholder engagement, so I guess this is part of phase one, where we're kind of having sort of high-level discussions with people in terms of setting out the overall approach. We're going to be having more bespoke, kind of detailed roundtable type discussions with stakeholders, including tenants, on the tenant satisfaction measures in due course. And then we will be having the kind of, in phase three, some sort of detailed technical discussions with housing data geeks, as we say, as well on the kind of very specific issues about the methodology and so on. We want to have all of that engagement underway now, well, from now until the winter, so that we can use that engagement to inform the formal consultation document that we will be issuing towards the end of the year. Some of the kind of key issues that we need to kind of work through are the kind of detailed design of the specific tenant satisfaction measures. So things like the definitions and so on. We need to kind of work through the methodological issues and design, for the satisfaction measures. What are the proposed questions that we will ask to kind of record satisfaction, how that links into the regulatory requirements that will be needed to underpin it, as well as having discussions with landlords about the practicalities of preparing the systems needed for the tenant satisfaction measures to be successful.